Hey everyone, and welcome to another all-English episode of台本なし英会話レッスン. I'm Reilly. My Instagram is Reilly Sullivan XD, and Sota's Instagram is eigo no sota. So I hope everyone had a good Golden Week. I did. Some of my friends and I went to Osaka for Monday through Friday, and had a lot of kind of adventures, but maybe those are stories for another episode. And I also met Sota, and he treated me and Yuki to a very nice teppanyaki lunch, and then showed us around the Tennoji area, which was really cool and interesting. Maybe you saw it on Sota's Instagram, and mine a little bit. Anyway, before we start, I wanted to talk a little bit about the last few episodes, the Shimanami Kaido episodes. So I talked a lot about kind of the problems, the mishaps that happened along the way. But I also want to say that, like, through all those problems, all the kind of troubles we had, that it was like a really rewarding experience, and I felt like I was really able to bond with those friends in a way that maybe I wouldn't have if the ride had been like perfect with sunny weather and no forgotten wallets or anything like that. So yeah, I wanted to say that even though there were a lot of bad things, I really look back fondly on that time. I hope the last few episodes didn't seem like just kind of complaining, because actually it was fun in the end, having to experience all of that. But yeah, okay, going forward, this episode is going to be a little bit more homey. I'm going to talk about gardening and the little bit of gardening I've done here in Japan. Let's get started. Alright, so I've mentioned a few times in past episodes that I like to cook. And that was really kind of the impetus, kind of the starting point of me wanting to start gardening in Japan. Because I like to cook Mexican food, and sometimes a lot of Mexican ingredients are kind of hard to find in Japan. You know, Mexican food has a lot of hot peppers, chili peppers, that can be really hard, if not impossible, to find in Japanese grocery stores. So at first, I used to buy some of the ingredients online, but a lot of those are like imported and either not the best quality or very expensive because they're imported and stuff like that. So when I used to live in a small apartment, I tried to garden on my balcony. But back then, I didn't really know Takamatsu and the area so well, so I didn't know where to find the plants. So I really only found kind of the simple ones like tomatoes and whatever, green peppers, I think, and cucumbers. And those went okay, and it was like a good kind of experience to first try gardening, but it really wasn't the kind of thing that I wanted to grow, because, you know, of course you can find tomatoes, cucumbers, green peppers in any grocery store, any supermarket, any time of year. So then, a couple of years ago, when I moved into the house that I live in now, the house has like 2 kind of parking spaces for cars, but Yuki and I don't have a car, so we just kind of have like a yard, I guess you could say, like a garden or something. Between the 2 parking spaces, there is like an actual garden, like dirt with a tree and some other plants. So the first time, maybe 2 years ago in the spring, I went out to the local garden store, kind of not expecting to be able to find too much in the way of Mexican ingredients, but I was actually really surprised by talking to another friend who's interested in the same kind of cooking, and he said that they often do have chili peppers, at least jalapenos, and they even had habaneros, which are like an even spicier kind of chili pepper. And I think I also got some tomatoes at that time, and I tried growing them. and it went like pretty well actually. Like last year, I had way more jalapenos than I knew what to do with. So yeah, like in Mexican cooking, jalapenos are used a lot in like kind of salsas, right? Like a sauce you make with often the simplest one is tomatoes, onions, jalapenos, and cilantro or coriander. In the U.S., we call that herb cilantro. It's also used in Southeast Asian cooking, like Thai cooking or Vietnamese cooking. It's in Japanese you call it pakchi. In America we call it cilantro, and in the UK, other countries, they call it coriander. So anyway, that's like the simplest salsa. But I didn't want to eat salsa with every single meal, so I had to find other uses for jalapenos. And the simplest one is to pickle them, right? To put them in vinegar with some like garlic and maybe sugar, and you can kind of add those pickled jalapenos on top of different foods. But, even then I still had so many more chiles than I knew what to do with. So I tried to make what are called chipotle peppers. They're a kind of Mexican ingredient that are originally jalapenos, like fresh jalapenos, but then you smoke them. So I did that on my grill, on my barbecue, and put the heat low so that they just got a lot of smoke but didn't get cooked too much. And it kind of dries them out and wrinkles them and gives them this nice smoky taste. So that's what I did with a lot of my extras. Now this year, as it's kind of spring, maybe I guess the middle of spring now, I've started gardening again, and now this year I'm going a little bit more ambitious. I've got what do I have in the garden right now? I've got jalapenos again. I've got 4 plants this time. So this time I planted, last time I think I only had 2. So I have 4 plants, which I should be able to have enough to like give away to friends and things like that. And I have 2 poblano chile plants, which is another kind of pepper. There's something like what we would call in America a bell pepper. In Japan you call it paprika. And they're like, a bigger, kind of fatter pepper with a thicker skin. The main difference between a poblano and a bell pepper is that a poblano has like a little bit of spice, like a tiny bit of heat, more than a bell pepper. And then I also got tomatillos. Tomatillos means basically in Spanish it means like a small tomato, and they're kind of like a green. They're green tomatoes, and well, they're not exactly tomatoes. I guess they're related. They're in the same family of plants, like the same family that tomatoes and eggplant and a few other vegetables are in. But tomatillos are green, and they're not really good to eat raw. In fact, they might even be poisonous to eat raw. So you have to cook them. But when you cook them, you make a kind of like soup mixture out of them, and they're like kind of tart, not quite like sour, but like if you imagine what kind of an unripe green tomato tastes like, it's a little bit like that. And it's used a lot in salsas and Mexican stews and things like that. So those are just now starting to sprout. They're maybe about a foot tall right now in my garden. I also got a lot of herbs, which is strange because, like, in America, at least in American supermarkets, herbs are pretty easy to find, but in Japanese supermarkets, I find that sometimes you can find a few herbs, like maybe thyme or basil, but even those common ones are not there all the time, because I guess they're not used too much in Japanese cooking. But right now in my herb garden, I have basil, oregano, thyme, rosemary, coriander, cilantro, and mint. And the mint I'm hoping to use for drinks to make mojitos in the summer. We'll see how that goes. I also have a few like larger plants. I have a couple of blueberry plants that actually I've had for 2 or 3, maybe just 2 years now, but they've never actually produced any blueberries. So I'm still kind of waiting, hoping to see if they eventually make some fruit. For now, they're just kind of green bushes in my garden. And the most exciting thing for me right now is a lime tree that I got last year. And I got it when it was pretty small, maybe about a foot tall or something like that. And now it's taller than me, so maybe almost 6 feet tall. And just recently, in the last month, it started to bloom flowers, I guess I should say. And as those flowers are starting to fall off, there's little tiny green, I don't know what to call them, balls, I guess, that I'm not quite sure, but I think in the future will become limes. And actually right now there's like a lot of them. It's still a pretty small tree, but it must have more than 100 of these little baby limes on it. So I need to do some research, or if any listeners have any more experience gardening citrus trees, limes or lemons or sudachi or whatever, please let me know about how I should take care of this. I'm a little bit worried that if there's too many limes on the tree, that they might not grow to like a full ripe size. So yeah, that's about everything in my garden right now. I'm hoping later on in the summer, when some of my peppers begin to fruit and I can harvest them, that I'll be able to post some pictures of the food that I make with them. Yeah, I guess that's about it. Again, if any listeners have any more experience gardening than me, because I'm still new, maybe 2 or 3 years doing just a little bit of gardening, if any listeners have some tips or hints for me to garden better, I'd love to hear it. Please let me know. Yeah, so that's all for this all English episode, guys. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time. Bye.